All right, so you're here because you're curious about what makes people tick right, how we connect and build those strong relationships. And that leads us to our deep dive today, empathy. We've got Psychology Explained Understanding Empathy to help us along. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, empathy, pretty basic, putting myself in someone else's shoes, right? Well, what if I told you there's a lot more to it? We're talking centuries of thought and, get this, even some downsides to empathy.
You hit the nail on the head. That whole walking in someone else's shoes idea is a good place to start. But get ready, because we're going deep, way beyond the surface. Our goal, to give you that full picture, the origin story, the psychology behind it, and those curveballs empathy throws sometimes.
Okay, so let's rewind. Way back. Aristotle, Nicomachean Ethics, not your typical psychology textbook, but what did he have to say about emotions and getting other people?
Here's the thing. Aristotle, all those years ago, was saying morality wasn't all about logic and reason. He saw understanding other people's emotions as key to ethical behavior. So yeah, this connection between emotions and our actions towards others, it's a really old idea.
Wow, it's fascinating to see it way back then. Now, fast forward a bit, we've got Adam Smith, the economist, the theory of moral sentiments. He talked about sympathy, right? Sounds like a stepping stone to how we view empathy today.
Absolutely. Smith's big idea was that we make an emotional connection by putting ourselves in someone else's position, trying to feel what they feel. That mental exercise, like playing a role in your head, really shaped how we think about empathy today, how we connect through our minds.
Okay, so now let's jump into the psychology of today. Our source defines empathy as the ability to understand and share the emotions, experiences, perspectives, or situations of others. That covers a lot, huh? What are the big things to focus on?
Two things. You've got to understand the different ways this ability shows up. First, there's affective empathy. This is the heart of it all, emotionally. So what do you think that looks like?
Well, it's feeling with someone, that deep down connection. Like, if you see someone truly hurting, you might actually feel sad, too. Like their emotion triggers a similar feeling in you, you know?
Exactly, that shared emotion, the capacity to actually experience at least a little what someone else is feeling. Then there's cognitive empathy, the other side of the coin. How would you say that's different?
Cognitive empathy seems like more of a mental skill, understanding someone's emotions, their thoughts, where they're coming from, but not necessarily feeling exactly what they feel. Like, you know, when you get why a movie character feels completely alone, even if you've never been in that exact situation, it's like understanding their perspective intellectually.
Yeah, you get it.
Yeah.
It's that ability to step into their mind, to see their motivations, their feelings from a more observational place. And these two types of empathy, they often work together. Like they give you a fuller picture.
Yeah, totally. It's like cognitive empathy gives you the map of their emotional state, and then affective empathy lets you feel some of the terrain. This brings us to something people often mix up. Empathy and sympathy. They sound similar, but they're different beasts, right?
They are, and knowing the difference is huge for understanding what empathy really is. So they both involve reacting to someone's emotions, but the way we react is totally different. Let's think about that emotional resonance. How do empathy and sympathy differ there?
Well, with empathy, as we talked about, you kind of feel it too, right? You share in their feelings, mirroring what they're going through. But with sympathy, it's more like you recognize they're having a tough time, you feel bad for them, but you don't necessarily feel the same emotion yourself.
Right on. Sympathy is more like observing from the outside.
Yeah.
You see their pain, but you don't feel it yourself. You keep that emotional distance.
So that emotional distance is a key difference. Empathy, it closes that gap, creates that we're in this together feeling. Sympathy is more, I'm here to support you, but from a bit further away.
That's it. Empathy creates deeper connections because you're both in the same emotional space. Sympathy is more about comfort from the outside. It's helpful, sure, but doesn't create that same sense of deep connection.
This makes so much sense. Now, here's where things get interesting. Our source talks about the dark side of empathy. I think most of us think of empathy as, well, a good thing, always positive.
That's a common thought. And empathy is powerful, but like anything else, too much of a good thing can be, well, not so good. Like any strength, you can have too much of it. The first thing the source mentions is emotional exhaustion and something they call emotional contagion. What do you make of that?
Sounds like when you constantly absorb everyone's negative energy, feeling it yourself, it can drain you, lead to burnout. They mention compassion fatigue. Makes sense for, say, nurses, therapists, anyone dealing with heavy stuff all the time.
You're getting it. If you're always tuned into other people's feelings, it can really take its toll. It's like a contagious bug. Those negative emotions can spread to you and burn you out.
Then there's self-sacrifice and unhealthy dependence. How does empathy play into that?
Well, when you're super in tune with someone's emotions, you might start putting their needs before your own, which can lead to neglecting yourself. And that can create codependent relationships where you lose yourself in their emotions. The lines between your feelings and theirs get blurry.
Yeah, I get that. You focus so much on their experience that you forget your own needs, your own limits. Then there's empathy fatigue. Sounds kind of like emotional exhaustion, but different somehow.
They're related, but empathy fatigue often shows up as feeling numb, detached. When you've been empathizing intensely for a long time, you can kind of shut down emotionally, not because you don't care, but because it's a way to protect yourself.
Next up, the savior complex. I think we've all seen this. How does empathy lead to that?
It's natural. When you really feel for someone's struggles, you want to take away their pain, fix their problems. Good intentions, right?
Yeah.
But it can actually stop them from learning to deal with things on their own, building their own strength. And it puts a lot of pressure on you, feeling responsible for their happiness.
Yeah, like you're carrying their burdens. And then, of course, there's emotional overload.
Right. Taking in too much negativity can be just too much for anyone. It can lead to stress, anxiety, and just not feeling good mentally. It's like trying to process too much information. Your system crashes.
And lastly, the source talks about misguided empathy. This seems important. It's like saying our empathy isn't always accurate, that it can be unhelpful.
Exactly. If we base our empathy on wrong ideas, biases, or incomplete information, we miss the mark. We might offer the wrong kind of help, even make things worse. That's why cognitive empathy is so important. Really understanding what the other person needs, not just projecting our own feelings onto them.
Wow, this really flips the script on the whole empathy is always good thing. But the good news is the source gives us some practical tips for managing and balancing our empathy. This is the good stuff, the stuff you can use.
For sure. It's all about using empathy wisely, while also protecting ourselves. First up, self-care and emotional regulation. Why are these so important?
They're like the foundation, right? If you don't take care of yourself emotionally, you're more vulnerable to the downsides of empathy. Emotional regulation skills help you manage your own feelings so you don't get swept away.
Exactly. You need to be strong and balanced yourself to be able to truly help others. You can't pour from an empty cup, as they say.
Yeah.
And part of that is setting boundaries, which is hard, especially for empathetic people.
I can imagine. It's like putting up walls when you want to connect. But it sounds like it's about being there for someone without getting totally lost in their problems.
That's the key. Healthy boundaries let you be supportive without losing yourself. It's knowing where your responsibility ends and theirs begins. The source also talks about understanding that we don't need to go full-on empathy in every situation.
Right. You can't always be at that intense level. It's just not sustainable. It's about adjusting your response based on the situation, the relationship, or what's really needed.
You got it. Sometimes a more measured response, focused on understanding, is actually more helpful. Another important point the source makes is about taking stock of how you feel after you've been empathizing with someone.
Like checking in with yourself. How did that interaction affect you? And they also mentioned feedback.
Knowing your own emotional patterns can help you manage your empathy better. And feedback from people you trust can help you see how your empathy affects others. And lastly, for those in demanding jobs like healthcare workers, the source stresses getting professional support.
So important. When you're always in those intense emotional situations, it's crucial to have someone to talk to, process things, avoid burnout.
Exactly. It gives you a safe space to reflect, gain new perspectives, learn coping strategies. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, what are some key takeaways about managing empathy effectively?
For me, the biggest thing is realizing that taking care of yourself emotionally is not selfish. It's how you can give to others in a sustainable way. Also, just because you're great at empathy doesn't mean you're automatically a good emotional supporter. Those are different skills you have to work on. And I liked the point about not judging ourselves or others based solely on how empathetic we are. It's a really complex thing, influenced by all kinds of factors. And the best part, you can actually learn and grow in that area.
That's all spot on. It's an ongoing process of understanding yourself and making conscious choices to navigate empathy in a healthy way.
So let's recap our journey. We went back in time with Aristotle and Adam Smith. Then we unpacked today's psychology of empathy, affective, and cognitive. We looked at how empathy and sympathy are different, and probably most eye-opening, we explored the downsides of empathy when it's too much or misdirected. And of course, we gave you some tools to find that sweet spot.
So now that you've really explored empathy, think about this. What small change can you make in your interactions this week to truly understand someone else's point of view while also taking care of your own emotional well-being? It's about putting what we've learned into practice.
That's a great challenge to leave with, going beyond just knowing about empathy to actually using it more mindfully every day. And as always, we hope this deep dive has given you a deeper understanding of how we connect as humans. We can't wait to keep exploring this fascinating world with you in our next deep dives.